come here. I want to show you something. Now, you hear those words as a child from a parent, and you may wonder if you're in trouble. You hear those words as wife from husband or husband to wife, and you may wonder if there's a surprise on the way, or maybe you're in trouble. John heard those words from a voice up on high. Revelation chapter 4, the voice told John, "Come up here, and I'll show you the things that shall be hereafter." John was invited to get a glimpse of scenes happening in heaven. When we talk about the book of Revelation, some of the key ideas to keep in mind that bear repeating and emphasis, the fact that one, so much of what's described in the book of Revelation was shortly to come to pass. That's declared Revelation 1:1, and it's declared throughout chapter 1, it's declared in chapter 22, and peppered throughout the writing. The things of Revelation were primarily shortly to come to pass. Does the book of Revelation pertain to some things that would be in the long view? Absolutely. But by and large, the events would shortly come to pass. Also, it's important to remember when reading the book of Revelation that the language is highly figurative. Revelation 1:1, these were the things that were signified, given by signs, figurative language. Thus, these things aren't to be taken literally in terms of every description. We've attempted to portray it this way. If you've ever seen Egyptian hieroglyphics, then you understand the idea of a symbol representing a concept. With the book of Revelation, these symbols are in action, but each one represents a concept or an idea. John was invited to get a glimpse of the events taking place in heaven. Now, without spending our time trying to decipher every symbol, let's step back and take a bird's eye view and think about what the impact ought to have been then and ought still to be now for those that see what John saw. For those that they get to hear what John heard. We get a glimpse into heaven. How should it impact us? We'll look at Revelation chapters 4 through 7. Again, just bringing out key ideas, but in doing so, maybe, just maybe, we can be impacted by the encouragement here just as much as they were in the first century. Revelation 4, John is told by that voice, "Come up here." It's a voice like a trumpet. "I'm going to show you things that shall be hereafter." And immediately he's in the Spirit, and behold, there's a throne set in heaven, and one sat on the throne. The first thing he sees is a throne. It's the focal point. Everything is centered around this throne. Every action, every thought, centered around the throne. Would you want to be there? Would you want to go where John went, see what John saw? Does this sound exciting, uplifting, humbling, life-changing? This is where we want to be, right? This is where we want to go ultimately, to be gathered around God's throne, spending eternity with Him. Take a look at the throne. And the first thing to note is the Almighty sits on the throne. The book of Revelation is highly visual. John says, "Behold," verse 2, "a throne is set in heaven, and he that sat was to look upon, to perceive, and behold, like a jasper and sardine stone, there's a rainbow about the throne, and sight like unto an emerald." The depiction harkens all the way back to Ezekiel 1. That image Ezekiel saw over the firmament that was being carried by the cherubim. This image of the heavenly mercy seat, if you will. And John sees a figure reminiscent of what Ezekiel saw. This is a theophany, a depiction of God. The Almighty sits upon the throne, and He's glorious. He's glorious as the most precious stones of the day. He's glorious. And He's shining with brightness. He's glorious. The Almighty sits on the throne. Is that where we want to be? Wouldn't we love to get just a little closer? To behold it with our eyes. Consider the attendants around the throne. Around the throne, verse 4, there are the 24 seats. Upon the seats I saw 24 elders sitting clothed in white raiment. They're given seats. By the way, those 24 seats are thronos, just like the word translated throne back up in verse 2. There are 24 thrones situated around the throne. There are 24 thrones upon which individuals sit. Who are these individuals? I don't know. With it being the number 24, it would seem to be representative of the fullness twice. Perhaps representative of Old Testament authority, New Testament authority. Perhaps representative of the apostles themselves. Or perhaps just representative of those that have endured throughout God's interaction with His people. Whatever the case, picking up at verse 3, we know this much. They're given those thrones just like Jesus promised those that overcome in chapter 3, verse 21. They're given white raiment just like He promised in chapter 3, verse 5. And they're given crowns just like He promised in chapter 2, verse 10. To him that overcometh, be thou faithful unto death. He that overcometh, they're victors. No matter who they are, if we get any more specific, they're victors. They've won. And they're wearing victory crowns. Stephanos. They're gathered around the throne. And not only are they gathered around the throne, but John also sees, picking up at verse 5, out of the throne proceeds the lightnings, thunderings, voices, 7 lamps burning before the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. Out from the throne emits the Spirit of God, depicted as the 7 spirits of God. God's expression of His will, God's interaction with man. John beholds deity, surrounded by those that have gained the victory. And then there are the beasts. Picking up at verse 6, that sea of glass like unto crystal. And around about the throne were 4 beasts full of eyes before and behind. These beasts are again reminiscent of those that were described, the cherubim described back in Ezekiel chapter 1. The point being this: you behold the throne and it's glorious. You behold the attendants around the throne. They're the ones that are victorious. They're the ones that have served and stayed with. And then there's the activity at the throne. And it's worship. What are the elders doing? They take those crowns and they throw them down. What are the beasts doing? Holy, holy, holy. That's their declaration. Verse 8, holy, 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 Lord God Almighty, which is and was and is to come. Worship. What's the closest we can get to heaven while here? Worship. What's the closest we can come to being gathered around the throne? Worship. To exalt His name, to declare His worthiness. Holy, holy, holy. And then there are those among the Lord's people that say, is heaven just going to be a really long worship service? You know why that question gets asked, right? They don't appreciate who He is. They don't appreciate the concept of being in His presence. When we get to see what John saw, when we get to behold Him upon His throne, where else would we want to be? What else would we want to do? What else could we anticipate? We're gathered in the most glorious place eternity has ever seen, and we get to be there for eternity. Yes, we get to worship. We get to celebrate and rejoice in who He is. We also get to do that here. Isn't it interesting how often people need coaxed and cajoled and convinced in order to gather around the throne and offer up praise to His name? And then we run the risk of being guilty of gathering with the saints, meeting with the Lord's people, but when we sing holy, 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 what we actually say is holy, holy, holy. I don't think a single one of these elders depicted, I don't think any of these beasts or the angels that will be mentioned were lip syncing. They're involved. They're sincere. They're pouring themselves out before the throne. If that's where we want to be in eternity, shouldn't we be looking forward to it now? When we meet with the Lord's people, when we're able to encourage one another in lifting up His name and reminding one another of who He is by studying His Word, by observing the supper, by praying, by praising. Those elders cast their thrones to the ground. We cast our blessings together. When we see what they're doing, the closest we ever get to that here is right here. Do we appreciate it? We take a glimpse into heaven, and it ought to give us a higher perspective of sincere worship. The worship that pours its heart and its entire being into the exalting of God's name. But we move forward, because we not only look at Revelation 4, we want to take a peek at Revelation 5. Those that are saying, "You're worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power." You're worthy. You created all things. For Thy pleasure they are and were created. It's all about You, God. Is it? The one that leaves and says, I didn't get anything out of it. He didn't make it all about God. The one that says it wasn't worth coming today, he's measuring the wrong concept of worth. Worthy, 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 they declare. By the way, that word worship, you trace back the English roots of that word, and it connects to the idea of worthship. It declares the worthiness of the one receiving the worship. He's worship. He's worth it. So we worship. But we move forward. This time, Revelation 5. In the right hand of Him that sat on the throne is a book. And it's written within, without, on the backside, sealed with 7 seals. And there's a strong angel saying, "I can't open it, who can?" There's a strong angel, Ischus, full of vim and vigor, proclaiming with a loud voice, "Who's worthy to open the book?" Who's worthy? Well, the one that sits on the throne is worthy, but He's not opening it. Who's worthy to open the book? There's no man in heaven or on earth. Who's worthy to loosen the seals? John weeps because no man on heaven or on earth is found, verse 3. And so verse 4, I wept much because no man was found worthy to open the book. Now remember, the voice from on high said, John, come up here. I'm going to show you things that will be hereafter. And here stands John. No one is worthy to open the book that contains the things that God's promised to show him. Not even John. He wept because no one was worthy, including himself. It's a frightening thought. Right up until the voice says, verse 5, don't weep. Weep not. Behold, look. Hiddo, a form of that word, Ado, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, has prevailed. He's Nakao, he's conquered. He's overcome the root of David, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Son of God, the one whose genealogy comes through the King David, Matthew 1, Luke chapter 3. The one to whom the people said as he entered Jerusalem for that last week, Son of David, Hosanna in the highest. The root of David, the Lion of the tribe of Judah. He's described as a lion. And he's the only one worthy. No man, no person is able to open this book, but he can. Yet it's interesting, when John turns to look and behold this lion, picking up at verse 6, I beheld, and lo, in the midst of the throne and of the 4 beasts and in the midst of the elders stood a, not lion, lamb. The lion is worthy, but the lion's a lamb. He doesn't look and see a lion. He sees a lamb as it had been slain. He sees sovereignty and sacrifice in one entity. He sees deity and humanity all rolled together with perfect authority and humility. He sees Messiah right where He belongs. He has 7 heads, 7 eyes, the 7 spirits of God. They go forth into all the earth. Once again, a connection to God's interaction with the earth, particularly as it pertains to providence. He came, verse 7, He took the book out of the right hand of Him that sat upon the throne, and when He had taken the book, those 24 elders that were worshiping deity, they fall down before the Lamb. They've got those harps, and they have vials full of odors, bowls full of odors, incense, the prayers of the saints, and they're singing a new song. They say, "You're worthy to take the book." So now it's not only about sincere worship of God Almighty, but now there's a description of the Son's worthiness. Christians, this chapter ought to put into perspective our Christianity. No one else is worthy. Which means no other faith, no other system, no other set of beliefs, no other religion is able. He and He alone is the one that redeemed. He and He alone is the one that makes us kings and priests before our God. He and He alone is the one that allows us access to the very throne of God and the invitation to spend eternity in His presence. He and He alone. He's not Allah. He's not Muhammad. He's not Buddha. He's not Confucius. We're not talking about Hare Krishna or any other form of religion. He and He alone. The exclusivity of the Son of God is declared on no uncertain terms. Only one's worthy. In John's day, it'd be worth noting that Caesar wasn't worthy. In our day, it's worth noting that no politician's worthy. Only one. No religious leader worthy. Only the Christ. We take a look at Revelation 5. The lion is the only one that's worthy. The lion is the lamb. And that lamb, He's worshipped also. Not only do they declare His worthiness, but verse 9, moving forward, verse 11, I heard the voice of many angels round about the throne, the beast and the elders. The number of them was 10,000 times 10,000. And what are they saying? Worthy is the Lamb. He was slain, but He's worthy. He's deserving of the power, the riches, the wisdom, the strength, the honor, the glory, the blessing. He's worthy of it all. It all belongs to Him. He's the one. Morality is important. Absolutely. Immorality is the very reason that He had to die in order to save us from sin. But morality in and of itself doesn't save. If we miss what's most important by focusing on, well, my neighbor is a morally upright fellow, I think he's all right. No, he doesn't worship Christ. Maybe he's denominational. Maybe he's following some false god. Morality isn't the standard. Morality is simply a reflection of serving God, but there are those that will practice immorality and not serve. Morality and morality alone will not save. We don't come to Jesus through morality. We come to morality through Christ. He's the one that saves. He's the one that's worthy. And He's the one that's worshiped. Thus, picking up at the end of verse 13, blessing and honor and glory and power be unto Him that sits on the throne. By the way, this is coming from every creature which is in heaven and on earth and under the earth. He deserves the blessing, the honor, the glory, and the power from every creature, not only those depicted in heaven, but all throughout creation, unto the Lamb forever and ever. A glimpse of heaven ought to change some things here on earth. It ought to give a higher perspective regarding the sincerity of worship. It ought to give a higher perspective pertaining to the Son's worthiness. Follow Christ. And then there's something else. Because He's worthy And because before He ascended to be where He's depicted in this chapter, He gave some instruction. He said, go into all the world, preach the gospel. Go ye therefore, teach all nations. And by the way, that's about to be depicted upon arrival in chapter 6. He's the only one that can open the seals. And as He begins opening the seals, the beginning will be encouraging, uplifting, victory. But over the course of the subsequent seals, life gets more and more difficult. Why? Perhaps because John and those of his day needed to learn something that we still need to learn today. When a person obeys the gospel, the next words are not, and they all lived happily ever after. The next words ought to be, and they lived faithfully. Because happily ever after is only possible in one place, and it's not here. Revelation 6, He begins opening the seals. And the first event that occurs, Revelation 6:1, I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals. The first seal, I heard, as it were, the voice of thunder, one of the four beasts saying, come. The King James has come and see, but it appears to be a summoning of the one that will come out. And that one, verse 2, I saw and behold a white horse. He that sat on him had a bow and a crown. It was given unto him that he went forth conquering and to conquer. The one that comes forth and appears carries victory. He carries a bow, much like God is depicted as having a bow, Habakkuk chapter 3. He wears a victory crown. And he goes forth conquering, nikao, gaining victory, and to conquer. How does the Lord conquer? What is it that's going out, gaining victory? This same inspired penman would declare to his audience, 1 John chapter 5, this is a victory by which we overcome the world, even our faith. What is it that is emanating forth and going out to gain victory and spread victory? Have no doubt, it's the gospel. Have no doubt it's the influence of Christ and the influence of His people. Thus, let the subsequent seals be a reminder of what happened in the first one. Because what occurs in Revelation 6, 7, and really moving forward, ought to put into perspective soul winning. Soul winning? Why soul winning? That's really what's happening in chapter 6, verses 1 and 2. Victory's being spread. Souls are being won. He's the one that was slain and has overcome, and now His victory is going forth. When that first seal is open, think salvation. White horse, purity. Victory, salvation. And they all lived happily ever after. And the book of Revelation ends, right? There are 6 more seals. We'll look at 5 of them. The second seal, verse 3. When He had opened the second seal, I heard the second beast say, come. And there went out a horse that was red. He has power to take peace from the earth. The opposite of peace is conflict. He removes tranquility and replaces it with turbulence. He removes peace and He gives persecution, that they should kill one another. There's given to Him a sword. This is bloodshed. Where the gospel goes, the Prince of Peace, the message of peace, the gospel of peace, there are going to be those that follow who don't want peace. Jesus warned His disciples all the way back in Matthew 10. He said, I came not to bring peace on earth, not peace, but a sword. I'm come to set a man against his father, a woman against her mother, daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. I'm come to bring a message that is going to result in families being separated at times. Why? Lord, why would you want to do that? He didn't say that's what He wanted to do. Lord, why would you do that? Because He's bringing a message that calls for people to follow Him and Him alone, and sometimes even mama and daddy or son or daughter doesn't want to do that. And it is incumbent upon each individual to decide whether I'm going to follow Him or not, which is why Jesus would say in the same context, Matthew 10:37, he that loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. He's the one that's worthy. Are we worthy of Him? Thus, we return to Revelation 6. There's salvation going forth. But following salvation, there's tribulation. Because there are those that have no interest in serving, no interest in following. They're going to kill one another. There's given unto them a sword. You follow your way through the New Testament. Acts 2:47, they're praising God and having favor with all the people. By the time you get to Acts chapter 4, there are a couple of apostles being arrested. Acts chapter 5, all 12 are incarcerated for a period of time. Acts chapter 7, Stephen is stoned. Acts chapter 8, the brethren are scattered. Acts chapter 9, we're reading about the persecution of one named Saul, breathing out threatenings and slaughter. Because where the gospel went, there followed a bloodlust by those that refused to heed the will of Christ. It's still the case. Oh, we live in a society where that bloodlust is not carried out in such violent ways, or at least not right now. But nevertheless, the tribulation that follows salvation is there. Christians, God's people will indeed all live happily ever after. But we don't get there until Revelation 21 and 22. And as long as we're here, we're not in the after. As long as we are here, there are challenges to overcome. Now consider moving forward, this time picking up at verse 5, when he had opened the third seal. Here's the third beast saying, "Come, and behold a black horse. He that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand, a scale indicating a scarcity." They're having to weigh and measure and be precise. He gives the price of food. Overpriced food, I heard a voice say in the midst of the four beasts, a measure of wheat for a penny, 3 measures of barley for a penny. See that thou hurt not the oil and wine. Necessities are overpriced, but the luxuries, don't hurt the luxuries. The oil and wine, take care of them. That's a depiction of a situation of discrimination. Scarcities are hard to obtain for some, but luxuries are readily available. Why? Because someone's just not being fair. Because someone's not behaving in a proper way. By the way, that idea will be further conveyed later in the book of Revelation when God's people are being treated a certain way and having necessities withheld from them by the society around them. The point for us to make here is this: tribulation and then discrimination. But I'm an American. I have rights. You can't treat me that way. Okay. I'm a Christian. It doesn't have to be right. The world's going to treat us that way. How many of God's people have lost sight of the word Christian because they're so focused on the word American? Have lost sight of the word righteous because they're so focused on the word rights? Have lost sight of the sun because they're so focused on Washington? Are we to have an impact on the society around us? Absolutely. But brethren, the mindset that says, you can't mistreat me, fails to recognize that the Lord gave warning after warning, and His apostles gave warning after warning, indicating that those that follow after Him are not guaranteed a bed of roses on this side of eternity. How many have allowed their faith to be shaken because life got difficult? How many have turned from the church, turned from Christians, turned from Christ because they hit financial obstacles? Maybe they hit family speed bumps. Or maybe they came across directed and deliberate distress because of their faith. He never promised a bed of roses. He promised a crown. He promised a white robe. He promised throne. But not necessarily here. Salvation, followed by discrimination, followed by tribulation, then discrimination, and then there's some condemnation. Revelation 5, picking up at verse 7, 6 rather, picking up at verse 7. The description is given of the next horse that comes forth, the fourth one, a pale horse, grizzled or gray. His name that sat on him was Death, and hell followed with him. And he has power, exousia, authority given over him and over the fourth part of the earth to kill with, don't miss these words, a sword, famine, death, that would be plague, and beasts. Those ideas are conveyed by the prophet Ezekiel 14:21, as God's four sword judgments. And that's exactly what's taking place here. In the societies where salvation has gone, and as a result there's been tribulation directed toward Christians, discrimination toward Christians, there's going to be a condemnation. And the Christians that stay there are probably going to have to endure some hard times because of that as well. The sword, the famine, the plague, the beasts. And yes, there's something to be said of the succession and progression of these things. Where the sword goes and leaves slaughter, hunger often follows. And where there is an increase in hunger and famine, there tends to be disease and plague. And by the time it's all said and done, the only thing left is beasts. God's four sword judgments, depicted as being utilized in these places where God's people have obtained salvation, then received tribulation, had to endure discrimination. Now here comes the condemnation, the fifth seal. As things continue to get progressively worse and worse, the attention is directed to the throne and the altar before the throne. Verse 9, when he had opened the fifth seal, I saw under the altar of souls of them that were slain for the word of God, for the testimony which they held. And they cried with a loud voice, how long? How long what? How long, Lord, before you avenge? How long, Lord, before you reap justice? How long do you not judge and avenge our blood on those earth dwellers, them that dwell upon the earth, on the worldly? Because at this point, the ones that are crying are the ones that have been dying. The ones that are calling out from beneath the altar are the ones who had faced the tribulation and been faithful unto death. They're the ones that had endured discrimination. They're the ones that have perhaps even lost their lives because of a societal condemnation. And now here they are, and they're asking, Lord, what's the duration? How long? And He tells them. He doesn't give them an exact time in a minute, but He tells them. And by the way, the answer that He gives to them pertaining to the context wherein they asked the question, the persecution that was taking place at that time, the same answer still resonates today. When we wonder, how long does this have to continue? How long must God's people face these difficulties? How long must these saints in this area, or these Christians over here, how long? Verse 11 rather. They're given white robes, and they're told to wait just a little season, just a little longer. Again, He didn't give an exact minute or hour or even second, but what He did say was just a little longer, until their fellow servants also and their brethren should be killed as they were, that should be fulfilled. God told a man named Abraham, I'm going to give you this land, but not yet, because the iniquity of the Amorites is not yet full. God has always allowed the wicked to show just how wicked they were and just how impenitent they were before exacting judgment. That's connected to the idea here. The hardship's not done yet. There's more to be fulfilled. The iniquity of those that are reaping hardship on God's people is not yet full. But nonetheless, God knows what He's doing. Remember where this started. That first seal opens and out goes victory. And those that obtained the victory, that held to the victory, Christians, please hear this, they're still winners. And they're still won. We move through the hardships and the travesties depicted in Revelation chapter 6. Oh no, they lost their lives, but they won their souls. They were killed in the tribulation. They were starved in discrimination. They were slaughtered. Well, when society underwent condemnation, yes, but they won their souls. Question: how do we measure victory? What does it mean to overcome? Do we really appreciate the nature of the crown? Because those that won, the conquered, they're still winners. That's the consolation that begins when we get to verse 12. Revelation 5, picking up at verse 12, and then moving forward from there. Revelation 6, rather, picking up at verse 12. I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal, there's a great earthquake, upheaval. The sun became black as sackcloth of hair. The moon became as blood. This is the sort of upheaval and societal turbulence that's been depicted by Isaiah 13 and elsewhere. The point simply being this: society's falling apart. The heaven rolls back as a scroll. And the great men, the kings of the earth, the rich men, the chief captains, verse 15, they want a place to hide. They hide themselves in the dens and the rocks and the mountains, and what they say is, fall on us and hide us from the face of him that sits on the throne. Yes, the mighty men, the great men, those that were prominent and powerful, and those whose positions facilitated the tribulation and the discrimination and the hardship that God's people faced, now they're looking for a place to hide. And they're asking, who can stand this? Look at verse 17. The great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? This is consolation. Why is this consolation? Because while everyone else is running and hiding, the victorious are still victorious. Look at Revelation chapter 7. There's the description given of those that are seen in heaven. But before that, there are those that are on earth. Revelation 7, there's a statement made to the angel that has permission to hurt. He says, don't hurt the earth, nor the sea, nor the trees, verse 3, until we've sealed the servants of our God on their foreheads. Don't go out into the earth exacting ultimate punishment and societal judgment, not until the Lord's faithful on earth are marked. By the way, those faithful on earth are represented by the number 144,000, much to the chagrin of some of our religious friends who once believed there will only be 144,000 in heaven right up until their roster exceeded that number. No, the idea here is a large but limited number of Earth's population are faithful, and they endure. Who shall be able to stand? The faithful on earth. Who shall be able to stand? Look at verse 9. Lo, I beheld a great multitude which no man could number. These are the ones that stand before the throne and before the Lamb. They're clothed in white robes. They have palms in their hands. These are the ones in heaven, not on earth. And you can't count them. No one can number. And what are they doing? Blessing and glory and wisdom and thanksgiving and honor and power and might be to our God forever and ever. They're worshiping Him because they're victorious. Their souls are won. Their lives may have been lost, but their souls were won. Their finances may have been lost, but their souls were won. Their freedom may have been lost, but their souls were won. When we take a glimpse into heaven, it gives us a higher perspective of sincere worship. When we meet, let's gather around that throne. Let's cast every crown we think we wear, and let's exalt Him. When we get a glimpse into heaven, it gives us a higher perspective of the Son's worthiness. He's the one and the only one. He's the one who made all hope and all promise possible. When we get a glimpse into heaven, we get a higher perspective of soul winning. Not just of the necessity of going out and sharing the gospel, but of what it means for a soul to be won. Soul winning's not measured by wealth. It's not even measured by health. It's not measured by ease of life. Soul winning is measured by faithfulness. And the faithful can rejoice. Yes, there could be more discussed moving forward from the end of Revelation 7 and into Revelation 8. But for now, having gotten a glimpse into heaven, let's simply ask this question. Did you get a good look? Is that where you want to go? Is that the route you're currently taking? Is that where your soul would be if you were to leave this world right now? Would you be able to spend eternity in His presence? Or are you on a different path? Maybe it's the case this afternoon that you're a child of God who once had the victory, but some form of tribulation, some form of discrimination, some form of hardship in life has caused you to turn away. You ready to come home? Maybe you've never obeyed the gospel of Christ. The white horse still marches. The crown is still available. The gospel still conquers. Are you ready to let it win you? Willing to say, I believe Jesus Christ is the Son of God. He died, He rose, He left all the proof I need. I want to follow Him. I repent of my sins. Lord, wash me. Being baptized in the name of Jesus Christ for the remission of sins, Acts 2:38. This afternoon, if you need to respond to the Lord's invitation, if you want to make sure that you're on the road to be able to have more than a glimpse of heaven in eternity, why not come forward while we stand together and while we sing?